In sports betting, the holy grail for any gambler is the big parlay. It's the quickest way to make a ton of money, and that is what we're going to do here every single week. I'm Chris Horwedel, and this is my quest for unimaginable riches through impractical odds. Welcome to In Pursuit of a Parlay. Hello all, it's Chris and welcome to the first episode of In Pursuit of a Parlay, my quest for unimaginable riches through impractical odds. I'm so happy you could be here. This is something that I have been thinking about doing for a while now, just having a little fun. You know, there's going to be an evolution of it as we go along. This is kind of a test episode. It's a proof of concept. It's just to wet the whistle of the listeners and kind of give you a taste for what we're going to be doing in the future and what the whole concept of the show is. You know, moving forward, the plan is to have this streaming live on YouTube, have it streaming live on Twitch, all of that good stuff. We want interactivity, we want a community, we want to have fun. And you know, my intention here was never to really teach. That wasn't the goal. But, you know, we should explain things a little bit here at the top. For anybody who doesn't understand, the definition of a parlay in gambling parlance is a cumulative series of bets in which winnings accruing from each transaction are used to stake a further bet. Basically, you tie a bunch of bets together. On this show, I think we're going to go for 8 picks every single week for the parlay. And what it does is it increases the odds, it increases the payout substantially, but of course at the cost of having to get, 8 different picks right in order to cash out. With that said, anybody who knows anything about gambling, about sports betting, knows that the odds stack exponentially. They stack quickly, and we're talking about gigantic payouts, potential gigantic payouts for relatively low fees. We saw just last week a gentleman hits on a 2-pick parlay, picking exact scores of the NFL playoff games. I think he bet $20, and the payoff was a little over $500,000 for $20. But of course, that's because the odds are so high in each of the exact score prop bets. I think we're looking in the plus 20,000 range. Stack that with the 2-pick parlay, and you're talking about gigantic numbers. It's just, the house obviously has the advantage here. So on today's episode, I wanted to kind of show you how powerful parlays can be in turning a series of bets that have relatively low payouts, potentially, and in this case, even negative payouts, we're talking negative money, into something that, you can make a lot of money on, assuming you can do this right. And I do want to point out that we're not gonna, at least the plan right now is not to have like theme episodes like this, but it just felt like a good introductory point. So to go over things, I have said I am not here to teach you, and we're not going to have theme episodes. So far, I have taught you what a parlay is, and we're about to enter into a theme episode. So maybe I'm full of it. Who knows? We're going to be scouring my favorite sports books. In this case, I've got bovadasportsbook.com open in front of me for the odds today. And we are going to be looking at today's slate of basketball games. There are 9 NBA games today. We're going to pick 8 of them. I'm going to avoid the 76ers Mavericks game as it, hits a little too close to me and perhaps doesn't allow me to be as unbiased as I would like to be otherwise. So again, in order to show you how significant stacking picks and parlaying these larger bets together can be, all we're going to do today is use alternate lines. And to make things as easy as possible for us to potentially win and also to demonstrate exactly what we're doing here, we're going to take the favorites and we're going to give them points every single time. We're going to take the team that Bovada believes is going to win, and we are going to hit the alternate lines and add points to their totals. So the first game up today is the Boston Celtics and the Detroit Pistons, with the readily available line having the Celtics minus 9.5. I do think people sleep on the Celtics a little bit this season. They're 18-25. It's good for 4th in the Atlantic. But that's a winning record, and honestly, they're only a couple of games back from the second place Brooklyn, only 4 games back from first place Philadelphia. And we just had all-star reserves named, and Jaylen Brown was not one of them. I would think that slight is going to light a fire under him a little bit. He's going to want to show that he deserved to be in the all-star game, and I'm expecting a big game from him. Now, on the flip side of that, there is the possibility that exactly what's gone wrong with this team all season in Brown and Tatum's seeming unwillingness to pass the ball to each other, to teammates, to whoever, it could be worse. But I'm going to assume that Brown is going to play a little extra hard tonight to prove that he deserved to be an all-star. On the other side of that, the Pistons are they're terrible. They're 12-39. It's 5th in the Central Division, one of the worst teams in basketball. The goal here for this team, it's not winning games. It is, it's getting a Chet Holmgren or a Paolo Banchero or a Jabari Smith added to this team for next season. With that said, last year's number 1 pick, Cade Cunningham, has been great for them. He's their leading scorer, 15.8 a game, 5.5 rebounds, 5.2 assists. I was a little worried about the assist to turnover because there was a negative assist to turnover for him in college, but he's sitting above a 3-to-1, which is perfectly fine for an NBA point guard. Nonetheless, a rookie. And also, speaking of the Pistons and kind of apropos of nothing, but there's been talk that Jeremy Grant is one of the guys who could be available at the trade deadline just 6 days from now. And does it terrify anybody else that he has said he really only wants to go to a team where he can be the first option? This is Jeremy Grant. This isn't like Bradley Beal. It's kind of understandable if Bradley Beal, who is a top 15 to 20 player in the NBA, wants to be the best player on his team and wants the challenge of carrying a team. But this is Jeremy Grant, and that's not a knock on Grant, who did have a real breakout season last year, scoring a career-high 22.3, bringing in only 4.6 rebounds a game, 2.8 assists. But that three-point percentage had gone up substantially starting in the 2018-2019 season, where it rises from 29% the year before to about 39% that season with Oklahoma City. It sits around 38% in his 1 year at Denver. Now he goes to Detroit in that 2020-2021 breakout season, scoring a ton more, but also shooting a lot more, almost twice as many threes, from 3.5 to 6.1 a game, drops to 35%. It's acceptable for a guy who's probably a power forward in the modern day NBA, but that has regressed even further to 34 this year. His free throw shooting is okay at 83%, but he's less efficient overall. It just doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who is clearly the best player on a team that has the ability to contend for really anything, regardless of all of that. He's only played 26 games this season anyway, so I guess I'm just kind of venting there on the absurdity of it. So now if we head over to Bovada and we look at those alternate lines, like I said, this was originally Celtics minus 9.5. We can go all the way down. We don't want to take the crazy odds going like plus points or anything like that, but we can go all the way down to, say, Celtics minus 2.5. That brings it down to a negative 400. But as you're going to see, once we start stacking picks onto this parlay, that's really not going to matter. We're going to have a good, solid payout, and we're giving the favorites here 7 points to play with. Now we move on to the Chicago Bulls-Indiana Pacers game. Bovada has the regular line for this. Bulls, the favorite, minus 2.5. Chicago is, they've been one of the stories in the NBA this year, when healthy, and that's an important caveat because they aren't right now. But 32-19, first place in the Central Division, and they've won 3 out of their last 5, although they did just lose in overtime, 127-120 to the Raptors the other night. Yeah, as I said, injuries, the big story with Chicago. Patrick Williams is a guy who people thought would become a star after being a very high pick in the draft a couple of years ago. He's been out basically all season. You've got Alex Caruso's out, an important player on the bench. Lonzo Ball is out, who's having an incredible season in his first year in Chicago. Derrick Jones Jr. is out, and Zach LaVine is day-to-day in Chicago as of yesterday. Moving over to the Pacers, they just, they haven't been very good this year. 19-34, fourth place in the Central Division. They're a team where it seems like basically everyone on the roster is available. Domantas Sabonis is available, Miles Turner, Karis LeVert. Brogdon can't be traded this year because of the extension that he signed before the year, but if not for that, he would also be available. They don't seem to have an identity, although they do have Lance Stevenson back, born ready, back in Indiana after not really playing since the 2018-2019 season, where he was very mediocre and borderline inefficient in Los Angeles in limited minutes. He gets a chance on one of those hardship 10 days this year with Atlanta earlier in the year. Indiana brings him in. He scores 9.4 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, 4.2 assists. And, they're going to give him a chance. They're signing him for the rest of the season. So it's an interesting story. These hardship deals and guys randomly coming back are one of the things that makes this season so interesting, but also so unpredictable. And the Pacers have won 2 of their last 5 games. A good win over a Clippers team in there that is playing above expectations, but a bad win to a Magic team that is not very good. So as I said a little bit earlier, the starting line here at Bovada is the Bulls -2.5. We go over to the alternate lines, and we're gonna go. Let's give the Bulls some points here. We're gonna give the Bulls, turn it into, lines are changing as we're doing this right now. We're gonna change this, and they just improved, as a matter of fact. I wonder if the 2.5 stayed. We're gonna take the alternate line, giving the Bulls +5 at -295. So now through 2 picks, our parlay is sitting at -148. I would think we're going to be into the positive numbers either with the next one or the one following, and then we're going to build from there. Next up is one of the more interesting games when I was looking at these lines. It's the Cleveland Cavaliers versus the Charlotte Hornets. Interesting because the Hornets have really exceeded expectations, along with the Cavs, who have been one of the kind of darlings in the NBA, but that does seem to be changing a little bit lately. The Cavs find themselves 31-21, good for third place in the Central Division, well above teams like Indiana and Detroit, the bottom dwellers in that division. But over their last 5, there have been some concerns, but there have also been highs. It's been strange. The Cavs are the definition of unpredictable. They've won 3 of their last 5. But if we just look at the last 3, these games are a loss to the Rockets, a 3-point win over the Pelicans, and a loss to the Pistons. So you have to wonder if some of that pixie dust is wearing off in Cleveland, and they're sort of laying back into the expectations that we had for them at the beginning of the season, where I thought, maybe they're a play-in team, maybe they're a play-in team. I think they're one more high draft pick away from being a team that can really start to grow, but it shows that any given day in the NBA, I guess. Aside from rookie Evan Mobley, the real revelation in Cleveland this year has been how Darius Garland has played since the Colin Sexton injury. Garland, 19.8 points per game, good for 27th in the NBA, 3.3 assists and 3.3 rebounds, and 8.2 assists, which is good for 7th in the NBA. He's a first-time All-Star in the Eastern Conference. And, Jared Allen has also had a really good season in Cleveland. People think that, he's a guy who potentially got snubbed from a spot on the All-Star team this year. I don't think I can go that far, but he has certainly had a good season for the Cavs. Moving over to the Hornets, this has been one of the more explosive teams in basketball this year, just one of the most fun watches. 28-24, good for 2nd in the Southwest Division, behind only the Miami Heat, ahead of teams like the Atlanta Hawks. And now, when we're talking about all-star snubs, just with Jared Allen right there, I would argue that the biggest all-star snub in general was Hornets rookie LaMelo Ball. LaMelo averaging 19.9 points per game, good for 26th in the NBA, 7.2 rebounds at the point guard position, which is good for 45th in the NBA, and 7.7 assists, good for 10th in the NBA, while also shooting a really respectable 35.8% from 3 and 87.3% from the foul line. If this isn't an all-star, I don't know what an all-star is, quite frankly. If we're talking about LaMelo Ball as a guy who is in his 2nd, 3rd, 4th year in the NBA, putting up these numbers, might be an all-star starter. He's certainly in that conversation. Deserves to be an all-star, no question about it. To start things out here, we've got the Hornets -4.5 at Bovada, but we're not going to do that. We're going to head over to the alternate lines, and we're going to give the Hornets points. The Hornets -4.5, we can get them up to +3.5 at a -320, and I think that's going to be the value proposition here. We lose a little bit too much when we get up to +6.5 at -500 and stuff like that. So we're gonna lock in that -320, and we're gonna move on to our next game, which is the Atlanta Hawks versus the Toronto Raptors. This opens with the Raptors -2.5. But I think that's not where we're gonna end up. Let's talk about Atlanta. This team is 25-26, like I said a little bit earlier, underperforming a little bit, but the ship does seem to be righting. They've won 4 of their last 5, with their only loss being to a Raptors team that they're playing again here. In the last game, Trae Young went absolutely nuts. He scored 43 points, ending the Suns' 11-game winning streak. The Raptors are another one of those interesting teams. I feel like people sort of counted them out at the beginning of the season, but they find themselves 27-23. They're third place in the Atlantic. They're 3.5 games out of first place. They have won their last 4 and 4 of their last 5, with the loss being to the Bulls 5 games ago, and coming off of a win over the Bulls in their last game, 27-20. A game in which Pascal Siakam was absolutely great, 25 points, and they beat the Bulls in overtime. But I think the story here in Toronto is first-time All-Star Fred VanVleet. He finally gets to be the point guard with Kyle Lowry not in town anymore, and he has risen to the occasion for sure. 21.5 points, 4.7 rebounds, 7.1 assists. He's shooting the ball well from 3, 39%, shooting 87% from the line. Defense has been good at 1.7 steals. First-time All-Star in the Eastern Conference. Should he be an All-Star over some of the guys we talked about already, specifically, LaMelo Ball? I don't know about that, but here we are, and it's not that he hasn't been great this year. He absolutely has. So like I said, jumping over to Bovada, this is another really interesting one because the Raptors find themselves 2.5-point favorites. We're going to give them points. I'll tell you, I don't know, man. They might need those points to win. I genuinely think this might be a Hawks money line option, but that's not what we're doing on this particular show. So we're going to go to the Raptors. We can get good value still at -310, giving them 5.5 points. That feels like the kind of cushion that makes me comfortable with this pick. So yeah, that is where we're going to land here. We are going to sit plus 7.5 points at -400 actually is interesting too. And 4 picks into our parlay, we have got all of the favorites. We've given them all a substantial amount of points, and we are now in positive money. So this feels like we're doing something right. Our next game on the docket is the Houston Rockets versus the San Antonio Spurs. The opening line here is Spurs -4.5. Man, the Houston Rockets they're an interesting team for sure. They have just ended their what was a 4-game losing streak with a win over the Cavs the other night, but like I said, the Cavs don't seem to know who they are right now. They're a team in flux. I don't know how much to read into that. The Rockets, one of the worst teams in basketball, 15-36, 5th in the Southwest. I think they have the 2nd or 3rd pick in the draft right now, and it's just they're a disaster. Their leading assist man for your information is power forward Jae'Sean Tate, who is not what you would imagine when you're thinking of as a primary initiator in the NBA. This is a weird team. They go into the year and they decide, Kevin Porter Jr. is going to be our point guard, and he's missed some games. I think that's been a really big issue. Does obviously have more assists than Tate does, but doesn't qualify because of the missed games. He's at 6.2, but 3.6 turnovers. That number has come down a little bit from where it was earlier, but we're not talking about like Imani Bates at Memphis, disaster point guard play. but still pretty bad point guard play for the Rockets in general, and that helps to explain why this team has been struggling as much as they are this year. With that said, the Spurs have not been all that much better. There's just the continuity that you get from being a Greg Popovich-led team, a team that seemingly has drafted wings for the last 10 years in the first round. The Spurs 19-34, fourth in the Southwest. They've lost 4 of their last 5, the only win being over the Bulls. Lost their last 3, but 2 good teams, to the Suns, to the Warriors, to the Heat. It feels like the Spurs team is a little bit better than they seem. There are some injuries. DeJounte Murray is day-to-day, McDermott's day-to-day, Hurdle is day-to-day, Collins and Bates Diop are out, but we're still going to take them over this Houston team 100 times out of 100. Moving over to Bovada, looking at the alternate lines, like I said, we start on this one. Spurs -4.5. We're gonna take some points for the Spurs because that feels reasonable. We can go +3 for the Spurs at -340, and I feel pretty good about that, to be honest. This feels like a pretty close game, and giving us that 3-point cushion is what's going to allow us to potentially pull this out, I think. It's funny, my plan for this show was I thought, it's going to be in the 12 to 15 minute range, just doing it myself, having some fun on the sports book, but I think we're 21 minutes into this point, and we've got 3 games to go, so we're probably looking at the 30-ish minute range, and hey, so be it. Having a good time. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Look out for us, on YouTube in the future, on Twitch in the future. Follow us on the Twitter at Chris Horwedel and at the Underdog Pods. So we move to this next game, and on paper, it's probably the game of the night: the Brooklyn Nets versus the Utah Jazz. Opening line is Jazz -3.5. The Nets. What can you say about the Nets? They have been a disaster of late. There's no continuity. They just don't look comfortable either with each other or individually. Kevin Durant's been spectacular, but that's just not enough to do as much as they would like. 29-22, second place in the Atlantic Division. They have lost their last 6 games, prompting James Harden to basically push aside the idea of a players-only meeting, saying, "We've done enough talking. Let's play basketball." The last part's from me, not him. And there's all the talk that Harden's already gearing up to play with Joel Embiid in the summer, but the Nets are going to do everything in their power to make sure that is as inequitable a trade as possible if it does come down to a sign and trade, but time to talk about that later. Yeah, the Nets they've been a disaster. They lose this last game to the Sacramento Kings, which is really what prompted the outburst from Harden. They just weren't good. Now, with that said, this is a road game, so it is a Kyrie Irving game, as the Kings game was. Kyrie wasn't very good, played 37 minutes, 5 of 15, 2 of 5 from 3, 14 points. He's a +3 on the day, but 3 rebounds and only 1 assist. Harden, 12 assists, and 4 points for James Harden. And just horrible game. Maybe he's the guy who just needs to figure things out himself. Who knows? Do we buy that he's really struggling because of the basketball change? It doesn't feel like anybody else is really having this problem at this point. It just seems like he's unmotivated, and he is a guy who, as we saw in Houston when he put on a bunch of weight in an effort to be traded, when he's unmotivated, when he's disinterested, he is floats by on his offensive ability. Let's put it like that. Jumping over to the Jazz, this is another weird team. 31-21, good for first place in the Northwest, but they've won 1 of their last 5. They've won 2 of their last 9. They've won 3 of their last, 14 or 15. The team is really struggling, but for whatever reason, it does seem like they can beat the Nuggets. 2 of those wins in the last 15 have come against Denver. This is a challenging game. This is a really tough one to pick. I don't know that if we were just going straight who's going to win, then I wouldn't take the Nets here. This is another money line opportunity, I think. But we're going alternate lines to show the value of that. And on that note, like I said, the opening line here. Bovada has the Jazz -3.5. We need to get them plus points for me to be comfortable. We're gonna get them 4.5 points at -320. I feel good about that. And I guess we're gonna move on to the next game. I'm gonna have to do a recalculation of the odds, a final parlay odd once we get to the end, because some of these selections are not available as we're moving on. We'll get it all figured out though. Actually, one last thing before we leave this game. Joe Ingles suffers the knee injury, the torn ACL, a little bit ago, and man, does this injury illustrate just how important having a glue guy like Ingles to hold that roster together was for this Jazz team. He says he'll be back next year, no question about it. So we are going to move on to the Pelicans Denver Nuggets game. Opening line here, Nuggets -6. It's been a lost season for the Pelicans. Zion Williamson obviously has not played with the foot injuries. Who could have seen that coming? The Pelicans are 19-32, good for third in the Southwest. But that's only because you have some bad teams like San Antonio and Houston below them. They're 10 wins behind the second place team, the second place Dallas Mavericks. Without Zion, this is purely team Brandon Ingram, leads the team in points per game at 22.5, leads the team in assists per game at 5.2. I've always been a big Ingram guy. I don't think this is an anomaly that he's taken these steps up these past couple of seasons. Obviously, the 2 years prior averaged 23.8 on the dot, shot right around 38-39%. Down to 34% from three this year, and actually the attempts are down as well, but that's because there's nobody else on this team. If you put him into a team as a second or an unbelievably good third option, which is probably what he should be on a championship team, then these numbers are going to skyrocket. Efficiency is going to skyrocket. I think that three-point shot is going to be closer to that 38, 39, 40% than the 34%. 35% that it is right now. And also, I don't know if Zion is necessarily the solution to that, because it does really seem like those two, they don't coexist. They haven't figured out how to mesh on the court yet. The trade of one of them, presumably Ingram, because of how bankable Zion is, although with the injuries there is that concern, probably is best for this organization. Denver, on the other hand, has won 3 of their last 5 of their last 7, 28-23, second in the Northwest. It's a good basketball team. The Denver Nuggets are the Denver Nuggets. It is, as we talked about the Pelicans being team Brandon Ingram, this is obviously team reigning MVP Nikola Jokic, 25.9 per game, 7.8 assists. He is just an unbelievable offensive player and a James Harden level defensive player. I do like that this Nuggets team is coming off of a couple of losses, including a loss to the Jazz, which ended the season sweep for the Jazz over the Nuggets, which saw Trent Forrest lead the team with 18 points and 8 assists for the Jazz. Trent Forrest, if that is not the name of a fourth-year draft pick in a sim franchise on NBA 2K, I don't know what is, but good for Mr. Forrest. He has played well of late. 7 points and 2.3 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 40% from 3 over the last 9 games. As I said earlier, opening line for this one, Nuggets -6 points. We're gonna take these alternate lines here. We're gonna give the Nuggets. We're gonna go all the way up to Nuggets +2 points at -360. I like that. That feels like a lock to me, quite frankly. It feels like a lock. But that's why the payouts for these parlays are as high as they are, because any given day in the NBA, anybody can beat anybody, and we're trying to prevent against that with the alternate lines here. The final game we're going to look at here, the 8th of 9 games on the schedule tonight, is the Oklahoma City Thunder at the Portland Trailblazers. Bovada has this opening line at Trailblazers -8, which I believe is the second biggest opening line that we've had today. Everything's a blur at this point, but I believe that's correct. Let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. This has been, a bad team, 16-34, 5th place in the Northwest Division, but also a fun young team. Sam Presti has 18 draft picks over the next 18 first-round picks over the next 7 drafts, and there is a lot of young talent on this roster, including Josh Giddey, who is a guy who is going to compete for Rookie of the Year this year. Ultimately, he's probably going to come in second or third, but an unbelievable season for the young Australian point guard. I don't think anybody thought he was quite this NBA ready. The Thunder have won 2 of their last 5, including their last 2 good wins over the Mavericks and the Trailblazers, who they see again here. Lou Dort got real hot in overtime to push the Thunder over the Mavericks a couple of days ago. Dort had 30 points, including I think 14 straight for Oklahoma City in overtime. Not the go-to option I would have expected, but I've said it a number of times, any given day in the NBA, anybody can get hot, anything can happen. Really not the season I think people hoped for in Portland this year, especially going into a year where there are rumblings that franchise centerpiece Damian Lillard is unhappy. The big move was adding Larry Nance Jr. because that was gonna fix the defense. It turns out that didn't happen. Also, the core abdominal injury that Lillard suffered during the Olympics has caused him to have surgery. He's been out a giant amount of time. Whether or not he comes back this year, I'm guessing he doesn't. The team's 21-31 right now, 4th in the Northwest Division. They have lost 4 of their last 5 of their last 6, and there's some not good losses in there. The only win over the Rockets a handful of games ago. The one small piece of good news for this team, I guess, is that with the injury to Damian Lillard and with the earlier injury to CJ McCollum, they've been able to give Anthony Simons a lot more playtime this year. This is a guy I've always been really, really high on, and he's kind of proven me right a little bit there. It feels nice to say after so many guys I was wrong on. In January, for the month of January, this guy, 23 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, 6.7 assists, shot 42.7% from 3 on over 10 attempts a game. Unbelievable efficiency. Defensively, he competes. That's probably the best we can say about that. But Simons has been a nice piece, and he's a guy who you can probably comfortably move on from McCollum, knowing that you have the 22-year-old waiting in the wings to take over. Like I said, one of the bigger lines we're talking about today, we sit Blazers -8. We're going to move to alternate lines. Look down a little bit. Getting plus points is probably a little bit too much, but if we go Blazers, we can go Blazers minus. I don't want to go -2. We don't want pushes. That ruins everything. Blazers -1.5, and we're going to take that at -360 at Bovada. Okay, so we paused for a second there, and we're back to. We have our card together, our 8-pick parlay. And again, let's talk about what we did here. We took all of the favorites and we gave all of the favorites a bunch of points, a bunch of cushion to win these games. Our final card is going to be the Trailblazers -1.5, the Raptors +5.5, the Bulls +5.5, the Celtics -2.5, the San Antonio Spurs +3, the Utah Jazz +4.5, the Denver Nuggets +1.5, and the Charlotte Hornets +3.5. That 8-pick parlay where we take all the favorites, we give them extra points. We're sitting at a +728. Now, $100 wins $728. You can 7 extra money, taking all the favorites, taking points. All I wanted to do here is illustrate how powerful parlays are. We have a bunch. We have 8 bets, all of which are in the -320 to -400 range, and we have this outstanding opportunity to win and 7x our money. Now, in the future, this is going to go up substantially. We're going to be talking about $20 to win $250, stuff like that. The kind of stuff that is going to make sportsbooks, whether it's Bovada or somebody else, it's going to terrify them, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited about this first episode too. I think it went pretty well. I'm excited to get to the next evolution of this once we get a little bit more comfortable. But until then, good first go. The goal of this is, we're gonna do the show until I get rich or until I get bored. Either one of those could happen at any time. I'm like 2.5% bored. I'm 0% rich. So there's a cushion there right now. The show will go on. The show will happen next week. I've got an idea for what we're gonna do already. I'm excited for that. So until then, thanks for listening to this first episode of In Pursuit of a Parlay. I've been Chris Horwedel. Once again, make sure to subscribe to the show. Make sure to rate the show. 5 stars is wonderful. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Horwedel. Follow Underdog Podcast at The Underdog Pods on Twitter. All that great stuff. Again, thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.